So in this video, we're going to go through the back office details that are held against a company record, how you access those details and what they all mean. In terms of the access to these back office details, they're available from the View More submenu, and that's you've got invoice details, PO numbers and bank details. You can also access them from the right-click menu. You've got a back office submenu option here, then you've got invoice details, PO numbers and bank details available in here. And now these areas are available on the basis of a user group permission, or several user group permissions in fact. So you can define whether or not certain users have access to this information and certain users obviously have it denied to them. So we'll go to start with, we'll go into the invoice details area of the back office submenu. And what this area does is basically hold the default values that are going to be passed over to the placement record when a candidate is placed against this company. For the if we work through each of these fields, the invoice company will default to be the company as in this company name. But what you can do is also specify a separate invoicing company. So if there's a situation where there's a parent body or a separate sister company that the invoicing should be sent to, then you would do a lookup here to specify the specific company that you want to have as the invoicing company here. Registration number, obviously for the company registration, you can specify that there. An account reference of any kind. You can also stipulate the number of characters against the account reference as well. So by default, this has been set as 8 characters, but you can set that as many characters as you like based on a global setting. The invoice address, so this will be a list of all of the addresses against the company record, but it's on the basis of the address being set that it's an invoice address. So there's a flag against the address which specifies whether or not it's an invoice address, and if it has been set as an invoice address, it will list within this drop down option here. The tax code, which is predefined in admin as a lookup, so you can specify your different tax codes there. The VAT number you would specify here as well. Your invoice contact is a lookup of all of the associated contacts to the company, and you would specify your invoice contact there. Invoice method is defining how the invoice records are created in relation to this company, whether or not you want invoice records to be created against the company specific or per invoice in relation to a candidate, in relation to a PO, a contact, a purchase order number, or a timesheet. So you've got settings there which stipulate how invoice records are generated to this company as default settings. Invoice frequency is again another stipulation in terms of how often those invoices are generated for this company, and you can specify weekly, monthly, fortnightly or periodically, and on the basis of setting periodically, you're given an extra value here where you can set a unique number of days there for the invoice period, but we'll set monthly there. And then you have margin only, which is a yes/no field option, and that's obviously for instances where you bill the customer for the difference between the charge and the pay. There is no payment to the contractor as such. So these are essentially the default values which are held against the company record, and as I say, when you place a candidate against the company as a placement record, this information is carried over and stamped into that placement record. So these are essentially default values that are being stored against the company record ahead of when a placement is made. But this is invoice details. The next area to run through is purchase order numbers. So if we hide invoice details and a few more, select PO numbers. So these are PO numbers that have been set up specifically against the company record, where you have an established value for the purchase order number and a specific order date and expiry in relation to the purchase order number. Now you can have specific placement purchase order numbers which are against the placement record, and we'll come to that. But if you have a company specific purchase order number that's to be utilized against either multiple placements or multiple timesheets, then it's in this area that you would create that purchase order number, and then when you are in a placement record, you can then reference this purchase order number against the placement or the timesheet. So within this area, again, on the basis of user group permissions and having access to this area, you've got the option to add a PO number within there. But if we go into an existing purchase order number, what you can see is that you have an ability to enter the PO number reference. You have the order date, where the PO number was implemented. You have the expiry date of the PO number, the currency that the PO number is associated with, an order type, in terms of whether or not the purchase order number is specifically related to certain types of order, and a value, a total value in relation to the purchase order number. And those are stipulated here, and those can obviously be entered, deleted, edited from within this area. Again, this is on the basis that from within the placement you can then call these purchase order numbers from within here, but these are purchase order numbers to be stored against company records. The last area to cover is in relation to bank details. So if we hide PO numbers and a few more go to bank details, and this is an optional extra to store bank detail information in relation to a company. Again, this is on the basis of user group permissions as to whether or not users have either rights to view this information or add additional bank details to the company record. Again, just to reiterate the point that data is stored at rest in a encrypted format on the database. So should the impossible happen, the data is still in encrypted format and cannot be decrypted unless accessed within the application. So from a security perspective, it is stored and encrypted, so that's not a concern. But yeah, if you wish to store and create bank details in relation to a company record, it's within this area that it will be stored, and you would add it from clicking on that option, and obviously you can amend any existing bank details by selecting the current bank details that are held against the company record. So that's the invoice details, the purchase order numbers, and the bank details that are stored against the company record in relation to the back office information. And these are then carried over into the placement or made accessible to the placement as part of the back office workflow, which we'll come to in a later video.